Welcome back with a smiling face. Links to previous episodes are given in the video description, so don't forget to like, subscribe and share the video. Embers of Rebellion. Episode 1. Synopsis. Maren, the Alpha's eldest daughter and heir to the pack, sees her future unravel when she discovers she's pregnant with the son of the infamous Alpha Lucian. To make matters worse, Lucian denies any involvement with her, and her father rejects her, refusing to have a rogue whore for a daughter. Cast out from her pack and stripped of her title, Maren is forced to survive as a rogue, raising her son alone. Despite the harsh circumstances, Maren builds a new life for herself and begins to believe she's finally free from the people who once oppressed her. Just as she regains control over her life, Lucian returns, discovering that Maren is his fated mate and that he has a son. Now, he seeks to claim them both, but Maren has no interest in the man who denied their child and brought her so much pain. As the bond between them pulls at her, Maren must decide whether to fight for her independence and protect her son or give in to the mate bond and become the Luna of the man who caused her suffering. Chapter 1. Maren. My head spun as I looked around at my surroundings. My head was pounding, and I instantly regretted drinking so much. Panic courses through me when I don't recognize my surroundings. I am in a room. The light coming in through the window was blinding as I tried to figure out where the heck I was. The last thing I remember is the annual Alpha meetup, a costume party I attended with my family. My sister and I snuck off to meet with the other future Alphas after my father insisted I needed to get in good with, seeing as I will be the next in line and am to have the pack handed over to me at the end of the year when I turn 18. Yet, I have no memory of coming to this room. I groan, rubbing my eyes, praying I am seeing SHT, and the alcohol burning in my system is still making me confused, except when I go to move, I become aware of the heavy arm draped over my WAST. My head whips to the side, praying. It was my sister, and we had both passed out somewhere. My worst fears are realized, and I have to contain my scream of horror when I find a n-ached man lying beside me. He wasn't just any man but Alpha Lucian of the Dark Blood Pack. This man owned half of the city and is from a rival pack. My father was going to murder me. I whisper under my breath before looking down to find myself also n-ached. The slight discomfort between my legs made me very aware that I tossed my virginity away and have absolutely no memory of it, so much for that supposed to be a magical moment. I don't even remember it. He must be a SHT lay, I chuckle to myself. Of all people, it had to be the notorious Alpha and my father's biggest rival. My phone vibrating on the floor beside the bed has me almost diving off it to retrieve it. My sister's face pops up on the screen. I quickly answer it, mindful to keep my voice low, whispering into the phone. Hello, where are you? Dad is going to lose it. I told him you're with me, but he has asked me to come home, she shrieks through the phone. I look around before looking out the window, trying to figure out my location. SHT, I was still at the hotel where the Alpha meet was held. Still at the Banks Hotel, I whisper, and she pauses, going quiet for a few moments. Oh my god, please tell me you didn't F*K Alpha, she whispers, knowing Dad would kill me, probably dishonest me if he ever found out. Alpha Lucian's reputation was scandalous and terrifying. I look over at the Greek god lying in bed beside me, ultimately passed out and unaware of me standing and gawking at him. I would love to see the horror on his face when he woke up, but he just might kill me along with my father. SHT, they may even conspire together to make my death exceptionally horrific. No, of course not. I just fell asleep in one of the rooms here, completely alone, I lie, hoping Ava believes me. I won't get her caught up in my minor issue if Dad asks her, she svcks a lying. She doesn't know she can't get in trouble because of me. Stuff it, Dad asks. Tell him you stayed with Amber and me. I will have Amber pick you up on the way, be there in 5, she says, hanging up. I quickly look around, scooping my clothes up off the floor and squeezing into the tight bodycon dress. I toss the stupid A.SS fairy wings in the trash can in the bathroom. Looking in the mirror, I try to fix my makeup. My face is still covered in ridiculous amounts of glitter, and the eye mask that was painted on my face by my sister still concealed half my face. I chuckle to myself, knowing the Alpha will probably wake up just as confused as me and wonder why he is covered in glitter. I vaguely remember talking to him, finding myself drawn to him for some unknown reason, but he was paralytic, which left me wondering who took advantage of who. I give him one last glance, scoop up my heels and grab my clutch before rushing to the hotel door and swinging it open, only to crash straight into Alpha Lucian's beta. I recognize him from last night's introductions, though thankfully, he had no idea who I was as I was at the back of the room when he was introduced. I smack into his chest, and he stumbles back, staring at me. And I am thankful for the paint on my face because he may have recognized me as my father's daughter, and that is the last thing I needed. He smirks at me, clearly finding it funny that I am running from the Alpha's hotel room. My Alpha in there? He asks. I drop my head hoping he doesn't recognize me, and quickly nod. Stepping past him, trying not to touch him. Are you all right, or do you need a lift home? He says, making me stop. What, do you give all your Alphas one-night stands a lift home? I chuckle at him, and he smiles. Only the pretty ones, he says, and I roll my eyes, waving him off before taking off to meet my sister. We needed to hurry home before my dad sent out a search party to run through Mountain View City to retrieve his daughters. 3 weeks later, one night, that is all it took to throw away everything I had ever known. I felt a little under the weather, and being a werewolf, we rarely got sick. My father was the Alpha of Shadow Moon Pack, and after spending the last week sick, he had finally brought me to see the pack doctor. We lived in a city of werewolves, Mountain View City. The entire population was werewolves, comprising 4 packs. My father's pack was the second largest pack, and only having 2 daughters and me being the eldest, I was next in line for the Alpha position. Well, until the doctor came back and turned that dream upside down. The look of disappointment on my father's face made my heart clench. One night, one man, the biggest mistake of my life. She is pregnant, Doc Darnell tells my father and me as I sit on the green chair in the doctor's office. Doc's words horrified me. I couldn't be pregnant. I only had S*X once, and I don't even remember because I was trashed. How could this be happening? My father looked at me from where he sat before returning his gaze back to our pack doctor. It's wrong, rerun the test. She hasn't found her mate. She can't be pregnant, my father says. I shrink back in my chair. I was only 17, nearly 18, and the number 1 rule all she-wolves have drummed in our heads is to save ourselves for our mates. This was a huge deal, especially to my father. This would bring shame to our family, that I would break the one sacred rule for she-wolves. Sure, the men fool around, it was a little biased, yet we do, especially someone like me in a position of power, that would be frowned upon. I would be a disgrace to the family. Alpha, I have tested the urine sample twice, Doc tells him, but my father shakes his head, not believing his words or not wanting to. No, test it again, it is wrong. My daughter is not a rogue whore, I cringe at his words. That's what women are called who fall pregnant to someone that is not their mate, it is the worst thing to be labeled besides a traitor, yet both were treated the same. Rogue whores are forbidden on pack territories and are only allowed on neutral territory, which is the main drag of the city and the 2 streets behind it on either side. Our city was pretty lucky. Most she-wolves in other cities that fall pregnant are banished, making them forsaken wolves. They turn feral without any pack contact and are forced to live outside the cities, sending them crazed and mad like they do with those that betray or commit treason amongst the packs. No one wants to leave the city and be on their own out there. It wasn't safe and definitely not how anyone wanted to live. Our city is different. We didn't kick women out of the city and banish them. We just made them rogues, free to go about their lives without pack help. I used to look down on those women I would see trying to make ends meet for their poor choices. Maybe this is my karma, I was soon going to be one of them. Yes, Alpha, I will test it again, Doc says before rushing out of the room and away from my father's deadly glare. My father starts pacing, and I feel my heart rate quicken when he stops, turning to face me and staring at me. He has to be wrong, you are not like that. You wouldn't shame me this way, he says, looking for confirmation. I shrink back in my chair. The doc came back in again, stopping him from saying more. The results are the same, Alpha, Doc says before looking at me with pity. I swallowed, staring wide-eyed at the pack doctor, hoping he could save me from my father's wrath, but even I knew the elderly, graying man was no match for my father. Neither was I, since I still hadn't shifted. We shift on our 18th birthdays, then we can find our mates, but being pregnant would now delay that process. Our bodies won't allow us to shift while pregnant, it is a safety mechanism to protect the unborn pup. My father growls, turning on his heel and glaring at me, his fists clenched by his sides as he fights the urge to shift. I had never seen him so angry at me before, his eyes flickering black in his anger. My father has always been so proud of my sister and me, always showing us off and telling everyone about what great daughters we are and what a great alpha I would be when I took over the pack. I looked like him, and he raised me in his image, preparing me to take over. His dark hair, bluish-gray eyes, I got those traits from him, but right now, he looked on the verge of killing me as my face was mirrored in his black orbs. How far along is she? My father says. The venom in his words makes my blood run cold. We can have a scan done next week to confirm gestation, Doc tells him, and I look at my hands. No, do it now so we can take care of it before it gets out. I won't have a rogue whore for a daughter. This is not to get out, do you understand, Doc? The doc nods his head nervously while I am too busy staring gobsmacked at what my father just said. It was going against the moon goddess to abort a were baby. Wait. I say, finally finding my voice. My father turns to look at me, and the doc actually moves away from him when he feels my father's aura rush out of him. Wait for what? You aren't keeping this monstrosity, we can sweep it under the rug, no one has to know, and you can still take the alpha position, we just need to take care of this poor choice, then things can go back to normal, my father says. He made it sound so simple, like this wasn't sin against the moon goddess. No, I won't, I can't do that, father, please, just let me speak to Mum. We can work this out, I pleaded with him. No, you will terminate the pregnancy, then we go home. Doc, get whatever it is you need. I am not leaving this office until this is taken care of, my father says. I feel tears brimming at his words. Sure, I didn't want to be pregnant, but I was not a murderer. Aborting a pregnancy was worse than having a child to someone who is not your mate. Directly shunning the moon goddess. Alpha, I am afraid if your daughter isn't willing, I can't perform such a thing unless there is a medical reason. She is willing, Isn't that right, Maren? My father says, trying to force me to agree, but I met his gaze head on. My mind was made up, I won't go through with it. No. I tell him, not expecting his following reaction. My father had never hit me in all of my life, he had never raised a hand to me, and the shock of his action was more painful than the blow itself as his hand connected with the side of my face. I could feel the outline of his fingers etched into my cheek as a burning sensation spread across it from his palm. Then you are no longer my daughter, he says. Chapter 2. Loved ones came and visited the other mothers on the ward, excitedly gushing over their new bundles of joy. Excitedly talking about their new additions to the family. My heart twisted painfully, knowing no one was excited to meet my son. No one was coming to check on me or offer support. No one cared for the boy suckling at me. No one was coming, it was him and me against the world, but that was okay. I would make it work. How could anything so tiny and sweet be called a mistake? How could you throw your flesh and blood away, your own daughter, over her falling pregnant? It was a difficult labor, 34 hours and 45 minutes of pure agony and no comfort, not even from the midwives. They were nothing but rude and mean, telling me to quit my crying as I begged them to make the pain stop. I had never felt so vulnerable or alone as when I was in labor. The woman across from me was being doted on by her mate. The support he was showing her and the comfort made my heart clench. Was hard enough to be a werewolf and grow up with expectations of being the Alpha's daughter but shun her because she fell pregnant. Strip her of her title, and for one night. That one night turned my life upside down. Hearing the nurse come in, I look up. She grabs my chart from the end of the bed, looking it over before eyeing me. Her glasses perched on the end of her nose. She didn't hide her disgust for me. No one did, everyone looked down on me because I had a child with someone who is not my mate, that much was evident because where was he? Not here beside me like the rest of those new mothers on the ward, my mate wasn't here gushing over this newborn baby in my arms. You really have no idea who the father is? She asks, clicking her tongue. I knew exactly who the father was, but the last thing I needed was for him to hunt me down. I already had that run-in. A run-in I would much rather forget when I told him I was carrying his child. He didn't even remember me. Didn't help he was a rival pack alpha. It was easier pretending I didn't know. The shame I have brought my family for being pregnant was bad enough. My father would have killed me for the disrespect of foolishly getting into bed with the blood alpha. I watch the nurse flick her red curly hair over her shoulder. He is cute, shame his mother was a whore, she sneers, and I see the points of her canines pressing beneath her gums as they protrude past her lips. Can I get some Panadol? I ask, ignoring her comment. I had received multiple along the same lines since being here, and now I was feeling a headache coming on. I didn't feel the need to defend myself. There was no point. Nothing I say would make them look at me any different. Sorry, can't. It is not on your charts, she says. It's Panadol, not like I am asking for morphine, I tell her. Doesn't matter. It isn't on your charts, so you will have to go without, she says, dropping the chart on the table beside me. Most women heal directly after giving birth. Because I haven't shifted yet, I had no such healing ability. Can I get something to eat at least? I ask her. I was starving, and feeding was making me ravenous. You came in after the dinner rounds, and breakfast is at 7 am, she tells me. I look at the clock and see it is only just after 8 p.m. I nod, knowing this nurse was not going to help in any way possible. Crap, every nurse here was horrible because of my situation. I sometimes wished I could leave this city, pretending to be human and just go about my life with my son. The nurse leaves, stopping at the blue curtain that divides the beds. Did you even think of the repercussions of having a child to someone who isn't your mate? Did you think of the poor woman who finds him and one day learns he fathered an illegitimate child to some random she-wolf? I thought of that every day since learning I was pregnant, but it was his choice too. I fight back the tears from her words. Staring down at my amber-eyed boy, those eyes are definitely from his father. Mine are light bluish gray. I had just put my son down after he fell asleep in my arms when I saw the head nurse walk past. She stopped when I waved to her before coming over to me. Her long pencil, straight hair hung to her shoulders. She would have been in her mid-20s because she was closer to my age. Well, not really, I was barely 18, but still, she looked nicer than the previous nurses. She picks up my chart, flicking through it. Is there somewhere I can get some water? Or maybe a cup of tea? I ask her, and she glares at me. My stomach drops. Maybe she wasn't so lovely after all. She presses the buzzer behind my head, calling another nurse. Yet she still didn't answer me. My son starts to stir, and I reach over and grab him out of his crib when another nurse comes in, my stomach cramping from the sudden movement. Why is she in here? The head nurse asks, making me look at her. I just had a baby. Why else? I thought to myself. The new nurse looks over at me, her hands tremble slightly. This head nurse obviously instilled fear among her colleagues. Get her to the unmated section. We don't need her disturbing the mothers in this ward, the woman says before turning her nose up at me and walking out. I stare gobsmacked at this hospital's bedside manner. When I heard the girl in the curtain-off room beside me speak, I knew something was up with her hun. Her mate never visited her. No one has. Now I know why, the girl says to her mate. She was right. We were allowed one person with us constantly while in here. The girl next to me, her mate, hasn't left her side since I got here. The person across from me had multiple people come in during the night, and her mate also hadn't left. I tried to ignore their mates, gushing over them and tending to their every need while here I sat, copying nothing but sneers and judgment. Feeling the bed move, the nurse started rolling me out of the room because I was sitting upright. I had to grab the bar that ran along the side to stop from falling back. She wheels me through the maternity ward before going down a corridor, and I appear to be leaving the maternity unit altogether. The nurse finally stops at a curtained-off area and places the bed against the wall. The woman then turns on her heel and leaves. Wait, can I get some water? She was already gone and didn't even acknowledge my question. I wouldn't bother. They won't help us, comes a voice before someone jerks the petitioning curtain away. I found two more girls. One looked to be nearly 30 with long blonde hair and sparkling green eyes. The other was around 16 with her black hair cut in a bob. My name is Macy, the oldest of them says. Hi, Maren, I tell her. Her name is Zoe. Welcome to the Shunned Mothers Club, Macy chuckles before looking down at her baby. She sighs heavily. Don't expect them to help, they won't. Seriously, you're best off getting out as soon as you can, Macy tells me. But they are supposed to, I tell her, feeling disheartened. Yeah, I have been here 2 days, Bob has a few problems, half the time, they don't answer when I buzz and forget about them feeding you. I haven't received anything since being here, Macy explains before reaching to her feet and pulling a bag toward her. She rummaged through it before pulling out a muesli bar. Here you must be starving. I was, and I came prepared expecting this, Macy explains. You had a baby before? She shakes her head. No, this is my first. My mum was a single mother too. We are rogues like you, she says. I open the muesli bar, my stomach growling at the sight of food. Boy or girl? I asked the younger girl. She seemed rather shy. Girl, yours? Boy, I tell her. Thanks, I told Macy before biting into the muesli bar. Plenty in there, just help yourself. I brought extras in case there were other girls. Which pack are you from? Your aura feels quite strong for a rogue. She says, staring at me. Alpha blood, I tell her, and she seems shocked before nodding. In that case, you don't have to tell me. I understand why you would want to keep that to yourself. Zoe was born rogue, so was I, she says, and Zoe nods. If you don't mind me asking, but where are you girls living? Are there any refuges or anything for women? I have a place at a refuge. But I know it's full to capacity, Zoe tells me. Me? I live with my mum and my brother, Macy tells me. Where are you staying? No family would help. Zoe asks. I shake my head. No, we will be all right, I will come up with something, I tell them, hoping that would be true, though I have been living in my busted wagon I paid $500 for the last 8 months. It saddened me that we were pushed aside, but for the next day, both girls helped me, for which I was grateful. Macy also shared her food, and she was right. Not once did anyone come to check on us, no food was brought to us, nothing. Shunned for having a baby, and we suddenly don't matter anymore. Chapter 3. 2 weeks later. Tap, tap, tap. I look up and see a man tapping on my car window, his flashlight shining in the window of my car before he moves it around, looking in the back of it. I put my hand up when the torch flashes across my face blindingly. He quickly moves it to the side. Ma'am, you can't stay here, the middle-aged man tells me, he has to be council security because of his uniform. My son Valerian stirs, the bright light waking him, and he lets out an irritated cry. The man moves his torch away entirely, shining it at the ground, and Valerian stops. Look, I have noticed your car here for nearly 2 weeks, this is a train station, he sighs as I pick up my son out of his fruit box bed and roll down the window a bit so he doesn't keep yelling, thinking I can't hear him. You really have no place to go, no family? He asks. No, the council kicked me out of the park. He runs a hand down his face before glancing around the parking lot. The baby's father. I shook my head, knowing that wasn't an option. He didn't even believe me, refused to see me even when I begged him to let me on his territory so I could show him the scan. Every other time, he hung up the moment he heard my voice. After a while, I gave up. You know there are people out that would take him, then you could probably go home. I am not abandoning my baby like my parents did me, I tell him, outraged he would even suggest it. This is no life for a child. You're young if you give him up. You could still have a normal life. Something to think about. I will give you another week to find somewhere else. After that, you need to move on, he says, and I nod before winding the window up. I watch him leave before settling my son and putting him back to bed in the fruit box beside me. I have always been paranoid of rolling on him while asleep, tugging the blanket up over both of us before trying to get comfortable. A single tear runs down my cheek as I think of his words. This was no life for a child. Was I being selfish? Yet, the thought of giving him up broke my heart. He was mine. I loved him and would give my life for my little man, wasn't that enough? Waking up the following day, I groan, it is pouring with rain. I rummaged through the back for my umbrella before slipping my shoes on. Making sure my son is bundled nice and warm, I grab my bucket in one hand and pop the umbrella up as I open the hatchback. It was still early. I then pick up my son and make a run for it to the train station bathrooms. Needing to be extra careful not to slip on the W3T ground. Once I get into the disabled toilet, I jam the bucket in the sink, filling it with warm water before shimming my pants down to pee. One thing I hated about being homeless was holding my son while going to the bathroom. I couldn't place him down anywhere, making it hard to use the toilet while making sure not to drop him. When I finish, I slide my pants up with one hand, which is tricky while holding my son. I then wash my hand before turning the tap off. Now the tricky part. Holding an umbrella, a baby, and a bucket of water. Somehow I manage it and make it back to the car before placing the bucket down and quickly opening the hatchback to my wagon. I set my son in his bed before hauling my tiny bucket in. I then changed his bum and used soap to lather my washcloth, and gave him a wash down before dressing him, so he was all nice and fresh for the day. Using the remaining water, I also give myself a wash. Longing for a shower, gosh, I miss showering, something I definitely took for granted. I would use the rest stop ones, but I had no fuel to get there and wouldn't risk spending my limited funds. When Mum and Dad kicked me out, I had a small amount of savings. I also worked at the Chinese restaurant on the main drag to keep saving, but now, since he was born and my milk dried up before I left the hospital, I was forced to stock up on formula, bottled water, and nappies. The savings didn't last long with buying baby clothes and non-perishable food. My car looked like a mini supermarket, and I started to get low on the formula again. Rummaging through my wallet, I find my last $100. I needed to think of something fast. This wouldn't last us much longer. Sighing, I lean back on my door, watching the rain. The restaurant wouldn't take me back, I tried that. My parents weren't an option, and his father wouldn't even let me unpack territory when I requested to see him. I still remember when I got his number to ring him, what a mission that was. He laughed and said there was no way he would sleep with a 17-year-old. Well, he did, and now I have his son. To be fair, I was not supposed to be in that part of the club at the hotel. We wanted to meet the older alphas, not the young ones that hadn't even reached puberty, so with a fake ID, my sister and I snuck in while the meeting was going ahead in the conference hall. Alpha Lucian was just as drunk as I was, so it was no wonder he couldn't remember me. I felt this pull to him for some reason, and he must have felt it too. I couldn't have imagined it. Shaking the vague memory away, I grab a granola bar out and eat it. My belly is rumbling. What I would do for a home-cooked meal. I loved Mum's cooking. She was the best cook. A tear slips down my cheek, and I check my phone, yet I know I will find no missed calls. My father disconnected it on me, but I like to look at the photos of when I was still part of the family. I missed my little sister and wished I could see her, even just once more. I spend most of the day figuring out what I can do about money. The security guard's words ate at me. This is no life for a child. I was failing. I needed help and didn't know who to ask. When it starts to get dark, the 5 o'clock train pulls in. I tried to light my candle, so I had light, but my lighter had finally run out of gas. Popping the trunk, I try to find someone approachable to ask to borrow one. I grab my umbrella, hoping I find someone who might be smoking. "Excuse me, do you have a?" The man in his suit walks past, looking down at me. I try over and over again but am ignored by everyone that passes. Feeling disheartened, I was about to hop back in the car when I saw a younger man in his work suit. I had seen him a few times. He caught the early train and was always home on the 5 o'clock train. He was always dressed nice in suits and had blonde hair and green eyes, a muscular build, and a good foot taller than me. He stares at me warily as I approach, and I stop when I feel his aura. He looks familiar for some reason before I finally place him and realize he is one of the betas from the meeting at the Alpha meetup. He had beta blood, and I knew he was beta to Alpha Lucian, yet I pretended I didn't recognize him. He definitely didn't remember me, and I knew he couldn't feel my aura. I had been rogue for so long now my aura was almost non-existent. It doesn't help that I still hadn't shifted. I wanted to, needed to, but what do I do with my son? Can I borrow a lighter if you have one? I blurt out quickly before he waves me away, everyone usually assuming I am asking for money? He stops staring at me for a second. Fine, he says, rustling inside his pocket before handing me a green lighter. I ran back to the car and lit my candle that sat on a plate in my vehicle. Only when I turn around, I find him behind me, having followed me the few meters back to my car. I jump, not expecting him to be so close. Thank you, I tell him, passing it back. He nods then goes to leave, walking around the side of my car when my son cries out. SHH, SHH, I'm coming, I whisper, pulling the hatchback down when something stops it. I turn to see what it caught on, only for it to be pulled open by the beta I borrowed the lighter from. Is that a baby you have in there? He asks, and my heart thunders in my chest nervously. Would he call child services on me? Chapter 4. My son cries louder, and I reach for him. The man's eyes dart to him before he sniffs the air. Staring at him oddly, and I tuck him into my chest. It's only temporary, please don't call child services, I tell him, and he moves his head to the side, his gaze appeared to be more thoughtful than scrutinizing. Does your car run? He asks, looking at it before he kicks a tire. I have no fuel, I will leave tomorrow, I promise, I tell him, panicking. Maybe he was a council worker? I doubted it because of his expensive suit. He looks at me, you smell familiar, he mutters. I swallow, wondering if he remembers me, but he doesn't appear to, and I also didn't want him questioning which pack I was from. My father and his Alpha were not on good terms, yet maybe if he could get me in to see Alpha Lucian, he might help out with his son. However, that thought also frightened me, having to face the man who ignored me and refused even to do a DNA test, and he declined to come to check, stating my claims were lies, but if he just met him, he would see. We could always sense our kin. I stared at him, wondering if he would leave when he pushed the hatchback open further before reaching in. I scooted further back, looking for a weapon in case I needed it. Calm down, I can't leave you here knowing you are sleeping in your car with a baby, he says, grabbing the car seat. I will leave, just don't take my son, I tell him. He looks at me like I am mad. I'm not, I want to help, you want to help. I repeat, slightly suspicious. I must have heard that wrong. Come on, you can stay at the pack house until I speak to my Alpha, he says, waving me forward. Grab a change of clothes. We can come back to your car tomorrow, he says. I don't move, and he sighs before grabbing a bag. He grabs a tin formula, the nappy bag, and some of my clothes, stuffing them inside the bag. Come on, wouldn't you rather have a warm house than a cold car? He asks. I look down at my son, wondering if I should trust him. He grabs the car seat. I climb out, and he hands me my umbrella before shutting my trunk. This way, he says, walking to his car. I follow him to his electric blue sports-looking car. I always wonder why he didn't drive to work. And why would he leave such an expensive car at a train station? He puts the seat in before scratching his head. You know how to clip it in? He asks, and I nod. Okay, you put it in, and I will hold your. He looks at my son in my arms. Son, I tell him, and he nods, holding out his arms for him. He takes him from me, and I lean in, making sure to keep an eye on him while I clip the seat in before turning around. Retrieving my son, I clip him in his chair before climbing in beside him. He then passes me the bag before shutting my door. He turns the heater on when he hops in before glancing at me in the mirror. Your son has odd-colored eyes, reminds me of my Alphas. He is the only person I know with amber eyes besides his father, he says. I look at him, and he looks away, looking back at the road. He definitely has his father's eyes, but I keep my mouth shut. Though maybe this would be my chance, he would be able to tell if he saw his son. We can sense our own family, plus their resemblance was unmistakable. Who is your Alpha? I ask, pretending I don't know. Lucian the Blood Alpha, he says, his eyes darting to mine in the mirror again, gauging my reaction to his words. I feel excitement bubble in me, knowing I am correct in who he is. He will be fine with you bringing a rogue in the territory. I ask him. He won't be there, and I will speak with him tomorrow. Are you hungry? He asks, and my belly rumbles loudly at the mention of food. He chuckles at the noise. I will take that as a yes, he says, and my face heats. I give my son his dummy, his amber eyes peering at me in the darkness of the car. What's your name? Maren, I answer him. Odd name, what pack were you from, or were you born rogue? No, I was in a pack, I answer, but I refuse to tell him which one. It was no secret my family's pack and the Blood Alpha were constantly at war. Your name, I can tell you have beta blood, I tell him. Dante, and yes, I am Lucian's beta, he says before pulling into a drive-through. I grab my wallet. I don't want your money, he says before ordering. He asks what I want, but I don't say anything feeling awkward, so he orders 2 of the same thing. Is he asleep? He asks, and I look at my son. I nod my head as he pulls up to the next window. Climb in the front, he says, which makes me look at my son again, worried. I don't bite, climb over, he says while patting the passenger seat, and I unclip my seatbelt before climbing over into the front and placing the seatbelt on quickly. I noticed he didn't have a mark on his neck, so he hadn't found his mate yet. He opens some cup holders and places the drinks in them before passing me a paper bag. You can eat in the car, he says. I thank him and open his burger box, letting him pull it out. Dante pulls over on the side of the road before flicking the interior light on so we can see better before turning in his seat to face me. Eat. I won't hurt you. I open the burger box, my hands shaking. Are you cold? He asks, turning the heat up. I nodded my head. It was a lie. I was fine in the car, it was the fact I hadn't eaten a hot meal in ages or actual food that wasn't canned spaghetti or granola bars. I bite into the burger, and a sob nearly escapes my lips. I am quick to suppress it so he doesn't hear. I was chewing slowly, savoring the taste and the warmth. Looking up, he is watching me while eating his burger. I blushed, embarrassed that he was staring. He must think I am pathetic. I felt pathetic accepting a stranger's help. Thank you, I tell him while taking a sip of the cold Coke. It fizzed in my throat and on my tongue but tasted so good. Where is your family? He asks curiously. He is my only family, I tell him, looking at my son. They tossed you, didn't they, for being unmated? I swallow, looking down. My mother was a single mother, not a rogue. My dad died, she raised me alone, she struggled but had the pack. Must be hard having no one, he says. I don't say anything. What could I say? I am the disgraced daughter of an alpha. We ate in silence, and for the first time in ages, I felt full, yet still, he handed me his chips, telling me to eat them before starting the car again. It took 20 minutes of driving, and I realized we were getting close to my old pack before he turned to the opposite side of the road. It took another 20 minutes of driving through his territory before he pulled up at a large 3-story house. I could hardly see, it was that dark, but I could tell it was modern looking. You okay? Stepping across didn't make you feel sick? I shake my head. It was odd. Usually, rogues feel sick crossing a border, but I didn't. Hey, odd, he mutters. Are you sure it is okay for me to stay here? Yeah, no one is here, and you can stay in my room tonight. I have pack patrol, so I won't be home. I nod. The Alpha won't mind? I ask. Nah, he won't even know until I see him tomorrow. He is in the city partying tonight, you will have the place to yourself, he says, opening his door. He opens the back door, and I climb before walking around the car and grabbing my son out. He places the bag over his shoulder before putting his hand on my lower back, showing me to the front door. I watch as he unlocks the door before motioning for me to enter. Chapter 5. Stepping inside, Dante flicks the hallway light, and I can see better. The entire place is spotless. White marble floors and a massive staircase led up to the next level. I couldn't see in the rooms off the side because he didn't turn those lights on, but if the foyer was anything to go by, the rest of the house would be breathtaking. It was way over the top, nothing I wouldn't expect of the Blood Alpha. They are the wealthiest pack and have half the city under its claim. This way, he says, motioning for me to follow. I follow him up 2 flights of stairs before he stops at a black door. He pushes it open to reveal a king-size bed with a canopy. Mahogany furniture and a large black rug sat on the floor. A flat-screen TV was built into the wall, and he turned it on before turning the volume down a bit. I could also see a door leading to a balcony. Obviously, I don't have a crib, but the bed is comfy, and the bathroom is through those doors. It is shared with the Alpha's room next door, but he won't be by tonight. Alpha Lucian will probably stay at his flat in the city. Towels are in there, and I will be back to check on you at 6 am. I will take you to see the Alpha then, he says before walking into the walk-in and grabbing some clothes for himself. Kitchen is downstairs if you are hungry, and I will see you later, he tells me before walking out the door. I look around before flicking the air conditioning on and warming the room. This is nice, Bubba, and tomorrow you can meet your father, I whisper to him. I was excited, I knew he wouldn't be able to deny him once he met him. He would know with just one look of him that he was his. We could always sense our own kin. Walking into the bathroom, I gasp. It was white marble and white tiles with gold finishings. One wall was all mirrors above the basin, and the shower could easily fit 3 people. The sink was the perfect size to give my son a bath in. I was excited because he hadn't had a proper bath since the hospital. I knew he would love it and instantly started prepping the sink with warm water using my elbow to test it before stripping him off, ensuring I held his head above the water. He moved his legs and arms, swishing the water and babbling happily while eating his hands. Giving him the best wash he had since leaving the hospital, he relaxed more. Getting him out, I drain the water and wrap him a towel before drying him and laying him on the bed while I dressed him. After his bottle, he fell asleep quickly. I propped pillows around him to ensure he didn't fall off the bed before walking back to the bathroom and leaving the door open to hear him. Stripping my clothes off, I turned the shower on before stepping under the warm spray. I used the shower gel and shampoo I found, and I felt clean as I shut the water off. I was wrapping the fluffy towel around myself when I suddenly heard voices. Drunken stumbling, a woman giggling, and I froze. Someone was here. I grabbed my clothes off the sink basin and was about to run into the room when the door opened, and a red-haired woman walked in, stopping when she noticed me. She had a tight dress that left little to the imagination, and she was clearly intoxicated. She looks me up and down before she growls at me, her top lip pulling back over her teeth. "What are you doing in here, rogue?" she barks. Beta Dante stuttering, I try to explain when the door was shoved open, and a man stormed in. No, the blood alpha. He stunk heavily of whiskey, the smell so strong it burnt my nose, yet I couldn't tear my eyes from his amber ones. He was gorgeous even while heavily intoxicated and barely able to stand upright. He was tall too and way bulkier than I remembered. He had dark hair and a 5 o'clock shadow, but his eyes, those eyes I couldn't look away from. My brain fried in his presence and all I could do was stare, my brain screaming at me, my senses overloaded with his essence. Mate. The blood alpha was my mate. I knew it with every fiber of my being, even without having shifted yet. I was of age now, and I felt my heart flutter excitedly. I found my mate. Taking a step toward him, I reach out to him when his lips pull back over his teeth to reveal sharp canines. His face twisted in anger. I gasp, realizing he is too intoxicated to recognize me. Instead, he rushes toward me. His hands grab my throat as he pushes me against the cold tiled wall. "What is a rogue doing in my house?" he screams before sniffing me. I couldn't talk, his grip was tight as he restricted my airway. He sniffs me before shaking his head. Then he shoves me back before commanding me. "Get out of my house now before I have you killed," he says, and my stomach drops. He can't recognize me, I could just be a random off the street, some random rogue whore with how drunk he is, though he kept sniffing the air, his body telling him something was amiss, just the brain not registering me at all. I feel my heart sink. The woman behind him clearly enjoyed this confrontation, she probably hoped he would kill me. Rogues aren't allowed on Pac Land. I never should have come here. I never should have got my hopes up, not even my own mate would help me, and this was my only chance at showing him he is a father, and now it just went out the window. "Wait, but, you are my get out!" he screams, and I flinch, his command rolling over me, and I grab my clothes from where I dropped them, rushing into the room and pulling them on. "Come on, baby," the woman purrs, clutching onto him. Tears brim in my eyes while I snatch my things up, unable to do anything against his command, unable to explain myself. Wrapping my son in his blanket and tucking him against me. I grab my bag before rushing down the steps when pain smashes me, taking my breath away. Clutching the banister, my stomach cramps, making me cry out. I grit my teeth, pain tearing my heart apart. He was screwing her. I heard of women knowing when their mates are unfaithful, and I met him and with another woman. I didn't think it would hurt like this, I never envisioned this pain. He hadn't even marked me. Running down the steps, I rush out the door. It was pouring with rain as a storm rolled across the night sky. Looking around helplessly, I am miles from my car, yet his command told me to leave and gave me no choice. I start running, pulling my son under my shirt to shield him from the cold. My legs were moving with nowhere to go as I desperately tried to figure out where to go for shelter. I don't know how long I was running for, but I suddenly found myself on the city's main street. Looking across the road was my old territory. My father's pack was on the opposite side of the main drag and only a 10-minute run. Maybe he would take pity on me, perhaps he might change his mind once he met his grandson. I could only hope, at least for my son's sake. Swallowing knowing I have no choice or I would be in the rain all night with a baby. Deciding on taking my chances, I started running home. I ran the entire way before stopping out in front of my old house. The lights were all off. My heart twists as I look up the driveway of our single-story lavish home. Growing up here, I played with the pack kids in this street. Rode my bike along the footpath with my sister. My father used to toss the football with us on this very lawn after work when we were little, or he would help us climb the massive tree that sat off the side of the driveway. This was home, and I missed my old life, missed my family, I just hoped they missed me too. Chapter 6. Quietly sneaking up the side of the house, I stop at my sister's bedroom window. Looking in, I see her asleep in her bed. I tap on the window before I see movement, she flicks her lamp on, squinting around the room before looking at the window. Waving at her, my sister's mouth opens, and she becomes immediately alert before she rushes over. Ava throws her window open, and I pass her my bag, which she places on the floor before taking valerian from me, so I can climb through the window. "Sis!" she cries, hugging me. I inhale her scent, tears flowing down my cheeks, before pulling back to look at her. She clutched her mouth before a sob escaped her. "He's beautiful," she chokes out. I gently closed the window, and she hugged Valerian close, smelling his tiny head. I was soaked, my hair dripping from the rain. "Gosh, I have missed you. Dad wouldn't let me look for you, he has me on a tight leash," she says, tears streaking down her cheeks. "Grab some dry clothes, take whatever you want," she whispers while pointing at her dresser, and I rummage through her drawers. I find some warm clothes trying to be quiet, so I don't wake my parents down the hall. Putting on some of her pajamas and had to roll the pants to hold them up. My sister watches me before she breaks down again. "You're so skinny," she sobs, sitting on her bed and looking at my body. She was right. You could see most of my ribs, my hip bones jutting out. I had lost so much weight, and this is the smallest I have ever been. "I'm fine, Ava. I'm okay," I try to reassure her. But she shakes her head, looking at my son rocking him. Rummaging through my bag, I retrieve him a nappy. Thankfully my shirt kept him dry and the blanket that's wrapped around him. She moves over, leaning on the wall, and watches my son fall asleep in her arms. I sat next to her, laying my head down on her shoulder before breaking down. Ava tried to soothe me, and I could feel her crying silently beside me. How things had changed. Ava was my best friend, and I loved being her sister. You could never beat a sister bond, someone who knows your hardships, knows what it is like to grow up with the parents you have, someone who shares every milestone with you and every heartbreak. I missed having someone to talk to. Mainly receiving judgmental glares or few words to show their disgust of me. Nobody asked anymore how I was, nobody cared, and I was stupid enough to believe Beta Dante would be able to help, stupid enough to think my mate would accept me. "How is Mum?" I ask her, and she shakes her head. "She is okay, she asked Dad for a divorce when he kicked you out. But you know Mum, she would never leave him," she tells me, and I nod. It was unheard of for mates to get divorced. The bond stopped mates from being separated. It weakened them, two souls, together, or that's how it is supposed to be. I wasn't looking forward to the rest of my life feeling my mate whenever he was with another woman that wasn't me. I wasn't looking forward to raising our son on my own or being alone. When Valerian stirs, I get up and grab my formula before realizing I had no bottled water. Waving the bottle at my sister, Ava passes my son to me before grabbing his bottle from my hand. How much? 120 mils, I tell her, and she nods, opening the door when my son cries out really loud. I try to muffle the noise and soothe him by giving his dummy, but he spits it out. My sister stares at me in panic, quickly closing the door before it is thrown open and bangs against the wall. My father walks in. He looks at me. A growl escapes him, and I cower away from him. My sister gets between us and shields me from my enraged father. He shoves her out of the way before stalking toward me. Please, Dad, please, I beg. He grabs my hair, and I scream, and so does my son in my arms as I try not to drop him. My reflexes wanted to pull his hands away. Instead, I held my son, letting my hair tug painfully from my scalp. Mum, Mum. My sister starts screaming frantically before I hear feet slapping on the tiles. Please, Dad, Mum, help me. Mum, please, I beg her when she rushes in, her mouth open in shock as my father starts dragging me toward the front door by my hair. My mother grips his arm, pleading with him, John, please let her go, she has a baby in her arms. He shoves her aside before dragging me down the hall to the front of the house. Dad, please, it is raining outside, Ava begs our father. My mother is also frantically trying to stop him. My father does not care, he growls at them, ignoring them and my cries. He opens the front door when my mother shoves him. John, she is daughter, please, she begs, tears in her eyes and streaming down her face. That whore is not my daughter, he growls, his canines protruding. Dad, please, it is freezing outside, Ava begs. I said no, I will not have a rogue whore for a daughter, he screams, his face turning red in his anger. Then take him, please. I will stay outside, just don't put him out. Please, Dad, he is your grandson, I choke out. He growls at me, his hand shoving me out the door, about to shut the door in my face. Please just look at him, Dad. He will get sick, just one night, then I will leave, I plead. My mother reaches for Valerian, but my father pushes her behind him. John, at least let me take him, let me take my grandson, my mother cries. He lets me go, looking down at my son before staring at my mother, who was sobbing, her hands outstretched for him, those same hands that held mine when I was a little girl, now grasping the air for my son. Give him to her, but you stay out. You aren't welcome here, he says before walking off. My mother rushes over to grab Valerian before hugging me briefly. I will watch him, I will stay by the window, she says, and I nod. Ava has his baby bag, I tell her. My sister clutches my fingers, nodding. Tears rolled down her cheeks as her lips quivered. It's okay, Ava, I will be fine, I tell my sister behind her before my dad yells at them, making them jump. I'm sorry, I have to, my mother says, closing the door. I nod before the curtain in the living room opens, and the lamp flicks on. I saw my sister rush off toward the kitchen, and my mother sat on the lounge with him next to the window so I could see him. He has your nose, she says, smiling sadly at me, and I smile sitting on the chair out front on the porch. I shiver. My sister's flannelette pajamas become soaked as the rain blows toward me on the patio area. Listening and watching my mother through the window feeding my son his bottle. At least he is warm and dry, I think to myself. Huddled up on the chair, I tuck my knees to my chest, trying to warm myself and shield myself from the cold and the strong gusts of wind. It doesn't take long before I start shaking uncontrollably, and my teeth chatter so hard I thought they would break. My mother tapped on the glass where I rested my head. I could see her heart break at watching me sit in the cold and stormy weather. "Shift, sweetie, shift to try to stay warm," she says, placing her palm on the glass. "I haven't shifted yet," I tell her, and she looks at me sadly. Shifting was a big thing with werewolves, it was coming of age. Your wolf was meant to represent your future in the pack, yet I hadn't shifted, and it was not celebratory like it was for most wolves, it would be purely necessity. Chapter 7. What was there to celebrate? My failures, the fact I am packless and homeless, that I am raising a baby on my own because the father refused to believe he got with a 17-year-old because he couldn't recognize me as his mate. Shift. Please, Maren. I can't watch you suffer in the rain, please, my mother begs, sucking in a deep breath. You can do this, Maren, I whisper to myself. It isn't how you imagined shifting, but you need to put your big girl panties on and do what's required. I tell myself that nobody will be celebrating for you, not anymore, before stripping my saturated shirt off. I hang it over a railing along the far wall before shredding the pajama pants. I look around, it is late at night, no one will see me. Even if they did, they wouldn't pay any attention to the disgraced Alpha's daughter. My mother taps on the window, and I look in at my son drinking his bottle in her arms, gazing up at her nice and warm. His eyes get heavier and heavier the longer he feeds on his bottle. Thank you, I whisper to her. She smiles sadly while nodding her head. I'm right here. You don't have to be alone for your first shift, my mother says, and I nod. Usually, when a wolf shifts for the first time, they go running with their family, they have a big celebration. Me, I was shifting to stay warm, funny how things turned out. I was transitioning out of necessity while everyone else shifted for celebration. I have been able to feel my need to shift for months, however, being pregnant, I couldn't change without causing harm to my unborn baby, then it did not have anyone to watch him while I did. This was my only chance, yet I dreaded seeing myself in wolf form. Alphas were supposed to be big, but I had been stripped of my title and my pack. I hadn't shifted on my 18th birthday like I should have, and all these things affected our wolf's strength. Swallowing down all emotion, I kneel on the ground, stretch my fingers, and stand on my toes. My neck cracks first, my face twisting and morphing. Everything stretches and moves when I feel the first snap of bone. It was agony, I knew it would hurt, but I never imagined it like this. The first shift always hurts, apparently. Don't think of it, just envision your wolf, my mother tries coaching through the glass window. It shouldn't be like this, it wasn't meant to be like this, Dad always promised Mum and him would be there to help me through it. Deep breath and shove everything behind it, force the shift, don't wait for it, force it, Maren, my mother says, and I take a deep breath, trying to envision what I would look like. Would I be a sandy color like my mother or black like my father? A scream tore out of me that turned into a howl as the shift took over when I threw everything behind it like my mother said, bypassing the agony of shifting. Suddenly my hands were replaced with paws, my skin covered in thick fur, my face was more prolonged, my canines felt sharp as I ran my tongue along with them. Looking at my paws and my tail trying to see myself. I appeared to be a strange off-white color, almost a blue hue under the moonlight. Using the glass to look at myself, I was pure white, my fur one color only small, tiny, and thin. So small, I looked like an omega as I peered at myself. I looked up at my mother in the window, holding my son, one hand covering her mouth in shock. She was shocked at my size, the size of a castaway. I was easy pickings, and my wolf would only get smaller and weaker the longer I went without my mate too. My father comes over and looks out the window, a stormy look on his face. He is disappointed. I was not much bigger than a German shepherd, which is embarrassingly small. Most rogues would be more significant than me. Was this punishment from being stripped bare of everything? This is what's left of me? My father tugged the curtain closed like he couldn't look at me any longer, like he was disgusted, and I was too. Mortified at how weak I was. I press my nose against the glass, and I hear my father walk off when my mother tugs the curtain open a bit before sitting on the couch so I can see my son. Watching him through the glass, wishing I could comfort him but knowing it was best this way. He was safe and warm and, more importantly, dry. My mother managed to get him to sleep and made him a makeshift bassinet on the couch, and eventually, I fell asleep. My head rested on the brick ledge under the window. When the sun starts to come up, I quickly shift back, putting on my drenched clothes and carefully wringing them out to try and remove some of the water. I had just pulled the sopping wet clothes on when the front door opened, and my father stepped out of the house. I looked up at him from my spot on the ground near the window where I was crouched. He doesn't even look at me, instead tosses me some cash rolled up in a rubber band. "I want you gone before I get home, don't ever come back, Maren," he says before walking toward his car, not even glancing at me. I reach forward, grabbing the rolled up cash looking after him. Despite how badly my heart was breaking, he couldn't even acknowledge me. I still loved the man. He was my father, and tossing me away like garbage hurt, it hurt severely, making me realize I was nothing but garbage to everyone. The door opens, my mother puts her head out to see if he is gone before ushering me into the house. My sister comes running out with a backpack and some dry clothes. She hands me a towel, and I dry myself off before slipping on the jeans, shirt, and hoodie she had brought out for me. "Here, take these," she says, handing me a pair of her Nike shoes. I slip the socks on before placing the shoes on my feet. My mother was still holding my son like she didn't want to let him go. "I rang a taxi to come to get you," my mother tells me while my sister hands me a bag. Some clothes, toiletries, feminine products, girly stuff. "I also put all the cash from my safe in there," my sister says, and I swallow. "Ava, I can't take that," I tell her. "You might as well. I can't go to university now anyway. Dad is making me take over the pack next year." I suddenly felt guilty. Not only did I f**k my life up, but I ruined my sister's too. Now she was being forced to be alpha. Ava wanted to go to university and study some science thing when I was still here. She is wicked smart, and I ruined her plans by getting pregnant. Ava didn't look upset, though, just like she accepted it. "Take it, my old phone is in there too, and the charger I will make sure to recharge it every month for you so I can get a hold of you," Ava says, and my mother nods. "He doesn't have to know. What he doesn't know won't hurt him," my mother tells me. "So, you will come to see us, visit us?" I asked her, hopefully. Her face dropped. "No, you know I can't, but you can send us photos of." "You never did tell us his name," my mother says. "Valerian," I tell them. They looked at me funny, but I thought it went with his father's name, even though he will probably never meet the man, but at the time, I had hoped, now not so much. See, you can send a picture of Valerian to us, and we can use video chat, it will be the same, my mother says, only it won't be. It will lack the connection, the physical contact. Chewing my lip, and I nod, not adding my thoughts. That was as good as it was going to get. I was alone, not even my mother was willing to go against my father for her daughter. I shouldn't have expected her to. It was near impossible for someone to go against their mate. I never realized how much I missed human touch until I no longer felt it, only my son's. I craved contact, any form of interaction, conversation, someone to talk to that could talk back. You okay, Maren? Ava asks, and I nod, seeing the cab waiting out the front. I take my son, my sister's bag she packed for me, and the baby bag. I will not see you again, I tell them, letting those words sink in. I wasn't welcome back here, and they were too scared to come to see me. This would be it. They said they would ring, but we know it will only be texts if they manage that without my father realizing it. My sister squeezes me tight before letting go, and my mother clutches my face, her eyes filled with tears. You can do this. You will be all right, she says, her face lined with worry. She knew with how small my wolf is that I would suffer if anyone came for me. She knew I would not be able to protect myself. If they knew my mate had also tossed me aside, they would realize I was basically as good as dead. Without my mate, I would slowly deteriorate until there was nothing left, and I won't be able to shift and be practically human. Once that happens, I am as good as dead. Are you telling yourself or me that? I ask her, her brows furrow, she knows there is nothing out there for us. We were rogue, and nothing good ever happens to rogues, they merely exist amongst the packs, surviving day to day, praying we don't get picked off by bigger prey because, at the end of the day, no pack would intervene for a rogue, even if they have a child. Chapter 8. I had to hold my son on my lap in the back as the taxi driver drove us to the train station. We drove past a rundown hotel on the way to the station, and I think I may just have enough fuel to get my car there. Hopefully, I did. After spending the entire night in the rain, I wanted a hot shower, wanted something warm in my belly, but most of all, I wanted the safety of four walls, even if it was only for one night. I tell myself that one night is all I need to let it out, then I can look at it and figure something out. I handed the taxi driver some cash from the wad my father gave me. I had no idea how much my sister snuck into the bag, but getting my keys from the baby bag, I unlocked my car and climbed in, pulling the hatchback down when I realized I no longer had a car seat. SHT. I think knowing how long I saved for that car seat. I open the bag and empty my pockets after placing my son in his box bed. My father gave me $525. I snort. Gee, thanks, Dad. I think to myself. But that would buy roughly 16 tins of formula and 4 boxes of nappies, so it would keep me out of trouble for a while. Opening the bag my sister packed for me, I found feminine products. Hair products, makeup. Some black slacks and a blouse and some black flats, assuming she placed them here if I managed to get a job interview. I find her old touchscreen phone and a charger before finding an envelope. Opening it and pulling out all $100 bills. I feel a lump in my throat form. She gave me everything she had. I knew she did. There was nearly $8,000 in the envelope. She gave me all her savings, and I felt a tear slip down my cheek. Turning the envelope over, I see her neat handwriting. You can do this. I love you. It was written on it, and I nodded at her words on the envelope. She was right. I could do this, I could because I had no choice. I would make it work. Packing up some clothes and refilling the baby bag, I pack a little bit of food to eat later before changing my son. Once he is dressed with a fresh bum on, I grab my umbrella and toss my bag over my shoulder along with the baby bag before scooping up my son. Locking my car, I then start walking, deciding to head to the rundown hotel I saw. I wondered how I had never noticed it before, but even if it was just for one night, I could pretend I was normal. After a decent shower the other night before being tossed aside by my mate and my son's father, I now longed for a tiny piece of normal. Some dignity, a chance to feel human even if it was for only one night. I walked to the rundown hotel. The rain was only light and had nearly stopped when I reached the two-story rectangular building. It had peeling paint, and the gardens were overgrown. The sign out the front hung down, and the neon lights flickered as they tried to remain on. The lines in the parking lot were faded, and the hotel numbers on the door were barely visible. Reaching the office, a woman sat on the chair out front with a cigarette between her fingers. Pushing on the door, the bell sounded, and the woman sitting smoking spoke behind me. "I will be with you in a second, just let me finish this," she says, holding up her smoke. She stares at me, watching me, her eyes roaming over my appearance before stopping at my son in my arms. "He's yours?" she asks. I nod, looking down at him and tucking him closer. "The father?" she asks, and I shake my head. "Not your mate's?" she asks, and I feel tears burn my eyes at her words. "He is your mate, so why are you here?" she asks curiously, pointing to the chair beside her. She leans over looking at my son. She appeared to be in her 50s with dark hair cut to her shoulders. She had her nose pierced, heavy eye makeup, and a tank top and jeans. "He has strange eyes, reminds me of someone I used to know. Amber eyes are usually a family trait. Not many wolves in Mountain View City with eyes like that," she says. "So the blood alpha is your mate and his father," she says, and I look at her. She smiles and nods when I say nothing. "Powerful family, so why aren't you with your mate?" "He didn't recognize me and kicked me off Packland before I could tell him about his son," I admit. "And your family?" she asks. I fall silent, and she nods once before speaking. "My parents thought I was a rogue whore too, funny how things turn out." "So you have a child?" I ask her. "Had a child, his father took him, so you are rogue?" "I am many things but rogue whore. You and I aren't so different." "My name is Valerie, and you are?" "Maren, this is Valerian," I tell her, and her eyes sparkle. "Suiting, after his father," the woman says. "How do you know about his father?" the woman asks, looking at my son. "Only one bloodline I know that has amber eyes." "Come on, let's get you a room," Valerie says while getting up. I followed her into the small office. "I take it you have no ID?" she says, and I nod. "I have an old bus pass," I offer, but she shakes her head, waving me off. "I don't believe you will give me any trouble. Here, fill this out while I hold Valerian," she says, holding her arms out. I pass her my son, and she wanders behind the counter, sitting down while I fill out my paperwork. Yet I had no address, no keycard that actually worked anymore. I put the mobile number down for my sister's phone. "You hungry? I am cooking a roast, but it's just me and too much for one person. You can join me if you want, say around 5, it should be done," she says, nodding toward the door behind her. There was a beaded curtain, and I could smell what smelt like a lamb roast. My belly rumbled at the thought of a home-cooked meal. How about you get settled in, have a shower, and come through that door when you are done? We can have dinner together. It would be nice to have company. Not many stop over for the night anymore, and you can tell me how you ended up a rogue, she tells me. I dig through my bag to give her cash from the envelope when she hands me my son. No, keep it. Be nice just to have company, haven't had anyone stay in months now, Valerie tells me, and I look around. The place was a dump, but it was still nicer than the back of my car. Chapter 9. Lucian. The sun was searing my eyes out of my head as it lit up the back of my eyelids. I was just about to force myself up when Dante burst into my room, the door slamming into the wall loudly, the noise rattling my already pounding headache. "Ah, good, you're up," he says just as I sit up, rubbing my eyes. I wave him off, but he doesn't leave. Instead, leaning on the wall beside my dresser. "What?" I ask, my head pounding in my skull. I look around my room to find some redhead in my bed and groan, praying I used a rubber. She was tangled in the sheets, and just seeing her there irritated me. Stupid, why does it always pick bimbos? The rogue girl in my room, where did she go? Hey? What is he talking about? I was too hungover for his dramas this morning. I stare at the woman in my bed. Her hair spread out on the pillow while ignoring my beta. "Oi, whatever your name is, get up," I tell her, shoving her shoulder. She groans, rolling over, flashing us her tits. I growl at her, and Dante snorts. "Get rid of her," I tell Dante, getting up to pee. I push the bathroom door open, my senses coming alert. I could smell some faint scent in here. It made my mouth water but was so faint, making me wonder what chemicals the cleaning lady was using. "Lucian, the girl in my room, where is she?" Dante asks, following me to the bathroom. "What girl?" I mutter. I spot the trash can and see a used condom, thank for that. I think to myself. The rogue girl, Maren. "I picked her up last night and brought her here," Dante says, and I pinch the bridge of my nose trying to remember last night. My head was pounding, but I remember coming home, and the slag in my bed was whining about a rogue before it clicked, coming back to me. But I couldn't remember her face. However, something was nagging me about the situation. "Wait, you brought her here?" I ask, peering over at my beta leaning on the bathroom door. "Yes, and she has a name, Maren, her and her son. I found them sleeping at the train station." "What?" I ask, horrified looking at him. "She had no kid with her," I tell him, and he looks at me, his lips pulling back over his teeth. "Lucian," he growls, "if he was anyone else, I would knock him for taking that tone with me. He is lucky he is my best friend, or he would be lying unconscious on the floor." "Grab my keys, I didn't know she had a kid. I never would have kicked her out last night if I had known," I tell him. "Are you serious?" "It was pouring with rain," Dante snaps at me. I suddenly felt terrible, praying I didn't hurt her. I couldn't remember. My memory is hazy, and I am sure I was still pretty intoxicated with the way the ground kept moving as I walked. The woman in the bed stirs, sitting up and rubbing her eyes before running a hand through her hair. I roll my eyes at her, grabbing some shorts from my walk-in and a shirt. "Get your SHT and get out," I snap at her, scooping up her dress and chucking it at her. "Baby, what's got into why they gotta be such Klingons? Don't baby me, get out of my bed and pack house," I snap at her. She wasn't one of my pack members. God knows where I picked her up from. "Out now!" I yell at her, forcing my alpha aura over her. She jumps up, tugging the dress over her head before grabbing her shoes. She shoulder barges Dante on her way out the door, and I grab my keys off the dresser. Hoping I didn't destroy my car again driving home drunk. You're not driving, you still look half-tanked. Hurry up, maybe she went back to her car, Dante says. I feel guilty as SHT knowing I kicked the girl out in the rain with a baby. If Dante brought her here, she must have been in dire straits because Dante never brings anyone to the pack house. What did you say her name was again? I ask, wondering why he was so interested in this rogue. Maren, she smelled familiar, he says thoughtfully. And I can officially say you aren't the only freak with eyes like your father. What do you mean? Her son, he had the same eyes as you, could almost pass him off to be your son, he chuckles. I shove my feet in my shoes, growling at his words. That's the last thing I needed, an illegitimate child. It would be another thing for my father to breathe down my neck about. What you never know, you have a new girl on your arm every night, probably have 50 kids you are unaware of, Dante laughs. How old is she? Dunno, but I could tell she hadn't shifted yet, so must be young, he says with a shrug. Well, not mine then, I won't go near jailbait. She wasn't that young, probably 18. Well, nearly seeing as she hadn't shifted, he says. Did she say what pack she is from? Nope. Well, come on, let's see if we can find her. Maybe they might have room at one of the hostels to put her in for a few weeks. They really need to get rid of that law. We have a few what the other packs would call rogue whores in our pack, disgusting how the other packs just turn their backs on them. I sat in the passenger seat of Dante's car, the motion making my stomach turn as I press my head against the window. I must have nodded off because I woke up to Dante shaking my shoulder. Looking up, we were pulling into the transition on no man's land. That is her car, Dante says, pointing to a rundown wagon. Well, go on, see if your damsel in distress wants to be saved, I tell him, waving him off. It was pretty overcast today, the storm last night was massive, giant puddles in the car park had ducks swimming around in them, making my guilt worse knowing I forced a woman and baby out in this weather. He looks in the windows, and I sigh, tossing the door open and walking over to him. She isn't here, I wonder where she went. He says, looking around before walking off toward the train station. I will see if the guards are on and if they have seen her, he sings out over his shoulder. I peer in the windows of the busted-up wagon. The thing looked like a death trap. The car's rear was like a mini grocery department of baby items, tins of formula, and nappies. Canned food, a duvet, and a pillow. Hardly any personal items, yet I could see a photo album jammed between the passenger and driver's seat. Dante comes back, shaking his head. CCTV shows she left this morning with a bag and her son. Might have gone home. I suggest, and he shrugs. Walking to his car. He opens the back door before pulling out a baby capsule. I help him by placing it beside her car before rummaging around for a pen and paper. Leave a note with your number. You think she would contact you? I ask him, and he nods, finding an old envelope, scrawling his number on it, and putting some money in it to use a payphone if she hasn't got a phone. He places the note inside the capsule. I look around at the clouds. It looked like rain was going to come back. It will get wet, give the note and car seat to security to give to her, I tell him, and Dante nods, walking off toward the train station with the capsule in his arms. Not much we could do when she wasn't here, and I needed to go crawl back in bed or get my stomach pumped, either would do if it meant getting rid of this sickly feeling in my guts and this pounding headache. Chapter 10. Maren. We settled in the room, and I washed Valerian down with a wet cloth. It was a little too cold today for me to give him a bath right now. Once Valerian had settled and was napping, I had the longest, hottest shower in ages. Trying to wash the memories of last night away. I found my mate, saw him, and he didn't recognize me. But worse still was knowing he was with another woman. The agony that it caused as I ran home was heartbreaking as well as painful. When Dante took me there, I hoped that he would recognize our son and get the help we needed, that maybe everything could be fixed, especially once I realized he was my mate. Allowing hope for the first time in ages, and I caught a glimmer of it only for it to be taken away, and now I was failing my son once again, that much I did know. I was failing my son, he would never have a father. I would never again have mine, and how I longed to go home, where I was loved and the cherished Alpha's daughter. Instead, I am now ashamed and scum, forbidden to speak to my sister in my father's eyes. Not even my mother would fight her grandchild or me. I knew she was hurting, but I could never choose anyone over my son, so how could she choose Dad over me? My life had fallen apart. I didn't think it could get much worse, but then it ripped my heart out too. I thought my luck was changing when he stepped into the bathroom. Every piece of me, screaming for him. I truly realized how powerful a mate bond is for the first time. Nothing thrilled me more, well, until I saw the look on his face. The way he yelled at me and ordered me off his territory. Only to have my father toss me outside in the rain afterward. Forcing me to watch my son being looked after through a window out of reach because I no longer deserve human decency from my own family. I thought I could do this. I thought I was stronger than this, but everyone breaks. Everyone has a breaking point, and I have reached mine. Everything weighing me down suddenly becomes too much, and I break. At least no one could see I really was while I cried in the shower, letting the shower wash away my sorrow. Wash out the pain I felt until it brought me to my knees. Making it startlingly clear how alone I was. Loneliness was deafening and cold, no one to tell you it would be all right, no one to help you pick up the pieces, no conversation, and I had lost my sense of self. I was no one now, just a mum, just another rogue for everyone to look down at. Even though I am not. He is my mate, who didn't see me. I realize how small and insignificant I am to everyone except my baby boy. Hearing a knock on the door, my head jerks up from where it was pressed to my knees. I get up quickly, shutting the water off and grabbing a towel. Maren dear, open the door for me. Sorry, just a sec, I call back, checking Valerian before tugging a shirt over the towel to try to appear presentable. I open the door to find Valerie standing there with a tray in her hands and 2 plates on it. Thought I would come to join you in here. The time must have slipped you by, Valerie says. I quickly take it from her, and she steps inside, walking to the small table. Oh, I am so sorry, I didn't realize how much time passed, I tell her, glancing at the old analog clock on the wall. Was I really in the shower that long? It's fine dear, I could hear you were upset, so I thought I would come and be an ear to listen, she says, and my brows bunch at her words. She points behind me to the bathroom. That vent there is directly above my kitchen. It echoes through the pipes. I keep meaning to get someone in to fix it, but no one wants to help a rogue, she says. My face heats, and I touch my cheeks. I am sorry. I didn't realize, I hope I didn't disturb you, I tell her, she waves me off. You forget I have been where you are, I would have put you in another room, but this is the nicest one left and is functional. The place is falling apart, she says. Valerian starts fussing, and I move to get up when Valerie does. Go get your pajamas on, I will watch him. Isn't that right, sugar? Yes, I love me some baby cuddles, she says, smiling brightly down at him as she scoops him up into her arms. Go on, get dressed, and then we can talk, she says, and I nod, quickly digging through my bag and grabbing some clothes out before rushing to the bathroom. I dressed quickly and came out with my hair wrapped in my towel. He is such a sweet boy, Valerie babbles to him. He eventually drifts off, and she places him back in bed. So, what makes you upset? Why the tears? It's nothing. Everything just got to be too much, I tell her as we unwrap our dinner from the aluminum foil. We tuck in eating, and I tell Valerie everything, bleeding my heart and soul out to her, the pressure lifting off my chest. I didn't realize how talking to someone who listened could feel relieving. Valerie also told me she found her mate when she was my age. Because she was an Omega, he didn't want to tell anyone because it would bring shame to her mate's family. These days it was uncommon for someone to be so prejudiced over ranking. The most heartbreaking part was he never rejected her, kept her around, refusing to let her go because he couldn't handle knowing she would belong to someone else. She said she became just another side piece so he would stay strong. Rejecting mates weakens us, yet I thought it was disgusting he would force her to endure that agony of being alone. When she fell pregnant, he took her son, said it was better if he raised him. She said besides pictures, she hadn't seen her son since he was a baby. He doesn't even know she exists because her mate told him she died during birth. Her story was tragic and gut-wrenching, yet she still loved him despite it. Have you thought of moving on? I ask her, and she shakes her head. He still comes in every couple of weeks to stay the night, she tells me with a shrug like she never thought about finding anyone else. Can I ask you something a little personal? I ask her. I needed to know if I would be tortured my entire life. You can ask me anything, but then I want to ask you something, she says, and I nod. When I found my mate, he was with another woman. The pain. I mean, does it feel like that all the time? Will it feel like that every time he is with someone? She swallows, her eyes turning glassy. Valerie sits back in her chair, looking towards the window, and she gulps. You will learn to endure it. After a while, even welcome it. Why would I welcome it? Because it makes you angry. I love my mate, but I also hate him. Sometimes hating them hurts less than realizing you will never have them. It reminds you to keep on living despite what they did to us. Hold on to that anger because sometimes it is the only thing that will keep you going, she tells me. I get a script though, powerful painkillers, they help take the edge off, but if he's anything like my mate, it is over quickly before set in. She laughs. Two-stroker, tosses his mate and wonders why he can't write, she laughs to herself, and I snort at her foul language, trying to hold my own giggle. She sighs, and I smile sadly at her. So, what's next for you? She asks. Unsure, probably go back to my car, see if I can get my old job back, though he said no last time I asked how about I hire you? I need help here, not that much can be done to save this dump now. She laughs, and I look around the room. What do you think? Or do you think it is too much work? I could always do it. Valerie says with a laugh. I have been tempted to, but before me, it was my mother's, so I am attached to this place, she tells me. I think it just needs a clean up, new linens and carpets and some paint. I could go on, but the list would be never ending. So if you are interested, you can live here for free, and I will provide meals and a wage, say 3 Zs an hour? She says, and I nearly choke on my spit. I wasn't even making half that an hour at the restaurant when I was working. Are you serious? I ask, a little shocked. Very, I could use the company and the help. I don't even know where to begin, and honestly, I lost motivation to do it years ago. We can fix this one up first for you and Valerian, she says, looking around. Tears well in my eyes at her generous offer. Don't suppose you got any friends, this might even be a bit much for both of us, she mutters, breaking off a piece of the table, the wood crumbling in her hand. I think of Zoe and Macy from the maternity ward. I might know 2 other girls from the maternity unit, I could try and contact them, rogues. She asks, and I nod. Good, tell them I will give them $25 an hour. I am good for it. I have more money than I can spend in this lifetime, so it would be good to get some help. It would be nice to see this place up and running again, it used to be the most popular hotel in the city when my mother had it. Also has a function room out the back, weddings used to be held here but not since it started falling apart. So no one comes out when you ring. I ask her, what is wrong with people? Who would turn her away? Nope, I organize workers, and they never show up. My mate keeps tabs on my phones, he is paranoid. I know it is he's doing, she says with a sigh. Well then, I will try to call the girls and see if they are looking for work. Would it be an issue if they brought their babies to work? Of course they can, there is even an old play center off the side of the restaurant downstairs, we could fix it up for when they are older and can play. Take turns watching them. While they are little, we can just strap the babies to us. Macy, I know has family, Zoe though I think is like me, she was a little quiet and young, so I am not sure if she could get a sitter. Well, if either need somewhere to stay, there are plenty of rooms, there are units out back, but they need a lot of work, she tells me. Well, I will let you rest, and let me know when the girls can start if they are interested. Come down for breakfast in the morning too. Here she says, handing me a key. That will let you into my studio, so you have access to the kitchen if I am not here, which is rare, I have nowhere else to go, she chuckles. Thank you, Valerie. You have no idea how much this means to my son and me. No need to thank me, Maren. So I will see you in the morning, and we will start ordering supplies, should be a pen and paper in the drawer. If the moths haven't eaten them, write a list of what needs doing that you notice, and we can go over it tomorrow, she says before looking down at Valerian on the bed. She brushes her finger down his little nose, her eyes softening before she clears her throat and nods to me before walking out. Join our Facebook and WhatsApp group for more updates, link is given in description, rest audiobook will be continued in next episode.